Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons sensitivity readers, and I want to talk about progression. So, it was progression for Dungeons and Dragons to have sensitivity readers, and now we're progressing to the point where we ask the question, who are the sensitivity readers providing sensitivity for? What groups merit their attention? All right. So let's jump into this. So what I think it's really what I find extremely fascinating is that so the main thrust of my channel is to ask the question, what is Dungeons and Dragons? Because I think in that answer is the next step for human evolution. In that, I think emotionally, wisdom, intellect, our emotion, our pursuit of wisdom, and our mastery of our own intellect, the magnification, the multiplication of our own intellect, is all bound up in Dungeons and Dragons. This is the tip of the spear for humans as we move away from, as the physical becomes trivial, and as the tangible becomes trivial and the intangible becomes invaluable and omni-important. Okay. And the reality is, people who do physical work, right, we need, they're not irrelevant, they're very relevant, but we're going to need to determine how to bring them along, because increasingly their tangible physical skills are going to be like, oh, thank you, robot. Like that's where we're heading, right? But for Dungeons and Dragons, no. Like, AI was like, hey, we're going to replace you for art. And then Nestor Osendin said, no, you will not. Get back. Right? Just send him to the back row. Right? Like, Nestor Osendin, like, Gary Kasparov beat Deep Blue. Nestor Osendin defeated AI art forever. Right? Oh, are you using AI art? I guess you're pursuing that so you can have subpar art than what you would get if you used a human. Like Nestor Osendin, whose art is so good, it fools even computers who try to determine if it was done by humans or not. Like, and it certainly fools OSR and indies who would know good art if it bit them. So, yeah. So, boy, that was my favorite D&D Crisis of the year by far. It was so fun. All right, okay, let's get there. All right, okay. Remember, don't have too much fun with the OSR and get everything wrong about D&D. This isn't about fun, right? It's about joy. Okay, all right. So, Dungeons and Dragons, I really thought Dungeons and Dragons was an engine to fix dungeon masters and dungeon performers, right? But that's really not the case. I think Gary really built it to interact and even demand improvement from American society in general, who weren't even aware of Dungeons and Dragons, and fix society tangentially, right? And one of those reality elements of that proves, in my humble opinion, that Dungeons and Dragons is fixing American society from the ground up are sensitivity readers, right? So Dungeons and Dragons, like everything else in the industry, the OSR and the indies see Dungeons and Dragons do it first and then badly copy it, right? Or don't, right? And so Dungeons and Dragons was the first really to use sensitivity readers significantly, right? And so and this year they actually got in trouble. I think it was with Spelljammer, and actually Spelljammer might have been the year before that, but this year there were definitely issues where sensitivity readers missed the mark on Dungeons and Dragons, right? But the reality is, we as Dungeons and Dragons dungeon masters and dungeon performers, we don't need to be ashamed that our sensitivity missed the mark every now and then, when the OSR literally has products that are using as a selling point that they don't use sensitivity readers. They're like, hey, come on over here. We'll have the deepest prejudice and the most horrible offensive speech possible in this product. Right? Like, the OSR is like literally selling as a selling point that they don't have sensitivity readers. But Dungeons & Dragons is like, sensitivity readers are needed, right? Yay, Dungeons and Dragons, clap, 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 for using sensitivity readers. But the conversation has changed, and I'm going to explain how I know this. I know this not from Dungeons and Dragons, but because I saw another game, a board game, a hot, fresh, brand new, top of the market board game, have a sensitivity issue that Dungeons and Dragons is about to have. Okay? And so let me explain it to you. So first of all, I am incredibly blessed to be on the front lines of board gaming. I own about 50 board games myself, and I'm down to about 40. I actually sold about 10 this year, so I culled down to about 40 board games. And recently, I've kind of really stopped buying board games, and the reason why is I'm connected to people who have much, much better collections than me. So I have access to 100, 150 premium, like premium board games, top of the market. Like, there ain't no sellers of Catan here. Like, we left that Euro junk years ago, right? We're doing the newest, freshest, most relevant board games. And so that means that I'm aware of Stonemaier. Are you? So who's Stonemaier? In board games, Stonemaier is a huge deal right now. The reason why is they brought out Scythe. Scythe crushed the world of board gaming. It was beautiful. It was about Russian steampunk mechs. And it really caught the zeitgeist for 5 or 6 years of board gaming and said, hey, what if board gaming was super crunchy and super beautiful? And that's what Scythe is. Well, Scythe was doing well, and then Stonemaier was like, hold my beer, we're going to beat ourselves. And they did. They built Wingspan, which was a very crunchy, very beautiful, very practical board game that was about American birds, right? The 965 birds on the American birding list, right? The life list, that kind of thing. And that sold 1 million copies. Wingspan sold 1 million copies. That is apples, bananas successful in the board game world. That's what everybody's trying to do, right? So then Stonemaier, the whole world's looking at him. They're like, hey, you guys are crushing it. What's coming next? And they said, hey, guess what's coming next? Space Bees. Now, the name of the game is Apiary, right? And they just released it. And it dropped at PAX Unplugged. Now, I was because I'm connected to this very robust board gaming community, I was able to play number 5076 of 25,000. I was able to play the stamped first edition of Apiary before it really even hit the open market, right? And I loved the game. It was absolutely fantastic, and it is about space bees. So it is a very crunchy, Scythe-esque, beautiful board game that is about space bees, right? Now let's talk about sensitivity readers. All right. Apiary is a disgusting, offensive, highly prejudiced game toward evangelical Christians, in my humble opinion, right? It's a fantastic board game, but there were no sensitivity readers on it. That is very clear, right? And the reason why is I'm an evangelical Christian, and I found the speech in Apiary horribly offensive. Let's get into it. So they open the game by saying 0 humans exist on Earth. And there is no evidence that humans exist anywhere. They actually posit a world without humans. Now, this is highly offensive to any evangelical Christian. And the reason why is we know the future, right? We know what's going to happen. So Earth will have humans on it until Jesus Christ comes back, and he will set up a millennial reign. He will reign on this earth for 1,000 years. Then he will destroy the millennial earth, and there will only be 2 things left: heaven and HE double hockey sticks. That's it, okay? And there will never be a point where there is an earth without humans. That is offensive to evangelical Christians because it says the Bible is wrong, right? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Apiary did not hire sensitivity readers, or they did. And those sensitivity readers did not think that evangelical Christians warranted any sensitivity. This is where we're going next for Dungeons and Dragons. Who gets considered for sensitivity, right? Now, we already know who has been considered for sensitivity for Dungeons and Dragons. To some extent. I'll give you my opinion. Who's been put at the front of the line, right? For Dungeons and Dragons sensitivity. Who is worthy of sensitivity, right? So far, that's been two groups, in my humble opinion, right? And I'm inviting you to correct me if I'm wrong. LGBTQ, first in line, right? Pronouns, they, them, characters, they were put first in line, right? So LGBTQ were given sensitivity readers, and this is good. This is human progress, right? LGBTQ absolutely were a marginalized group, okay? And they deserved to have sensitivity readers make sure that they were being represented in Dungeons and Dragons, right? And they have been for probably 10 or 15 years with sensitivity readers, right? Who is next? People of color, African Americans, and many other people of color groups in America. So I would say they were second in line. Tell me if you think that people of color were first in line, but I actually think they were second in line. But they were absolutely considered. Where are evangelical Christians on the sensitivity readers list? I don't think they're represented at all, right? Now, we are a marginalized group. Now, that brings up something interesting. Who are marginalized groups? You're like, wait a second, Scott, you think evangelical Christians are marginalized? Yes, I do. We are absolutely a marginalized group, right? First of all, we're not the majority. The majority of people are not evangelical Christians, right? Now, I will say this. I do think in America, the majority of people identify as Christian, but they're not, right? And there are definitely, this has happened before. The people of color had an issue with this. There was a person who was like, hey, I'm a person of color and I'm in power. Oh, hey, I happen to not be a person of color. Oops. And it's the same thing. We evangelical Christians, we have people who identify as Christian, but aren't Christian, right? And the reality is evangelical Christians are not even remotely close to being a majority. They are a minority, and they are a marginalized people group, okay? Now, what's interesting is, are there any groups, and this year, like one of the things that was very, very sad, especially with what happened on October 7th, there was a question of, is this group a marginalized group, or are they a group of power? And you're like, well, literally, isn't the word diaspora connected to them? Clearly, they're a marginalized group. And then other people were like, no, they're the oppressor. And you're like, are you kidding? Like, what is happening? So there is this conversation of who gets to be counted as a marginalized group. Also, when it comes to sensitivity reading, let's crack this can of worm open. What if you were a marginalized group, but now you are very much in power, right? And every year, people celebrate what used to be castigated, what used to be denigrated, what used to be have to be kept far from the public view is now massively celebrated. When is the point where a marginalized group says, you know what, we're no longer marginalized, we actually have a massive amount of power, and we want to thank the world for putting us in power, and we are massively represented through Hollywood, we are massively represented through fiction, we are massively represented, maybe even overrepresented. What group is that? I don't know. But we haven't even had, but what I'm certain of is we have no ability to have that conversation. We have literally zero ability to say, oh, hey, you guys were a marginalized group for a very long time. You're not anymore, right? We really don't have any real ability to transition marginalized groups to saying you are actually quite a privileged group at this point. Now, the reality is, I want to be super clear. For a long time, evangelical Christians were very privileged, right? And we were very much, we could walk into a president's office, right? We could have conversations with anybody we wanted to, right? And we were respected and feared. Those days are gone. Evangelical Christians went from privileged to marginalized. And here's my issue, right? Apiary, if they either had zero sensitivity readers, or their sensitivity readers said evangelical Christians do not warrant sensitivity, and we can offend them easily, broadly, immediately, with urgency. And they did. The apiary board game is highly offensive to any evangelical Christian because it says the Bible is wrong, right? That's offensive, right? Now, where we land in this is Dungeons and Dragons was right to have sensitivity readers. We've reached the next stage. And now the question is open. Who gets to be in line for the attention, the focus, the work of the sensitivity readers? I don't think evangelical Christians are in line right now. So we're about to get apiaried by Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't like that. Right? I want the sensitivity readers there in Dungeons and Dragons, but I want them to pay attention to me, the evangelical Christian, a marginalized person. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. That's barely important. What's important is when I get to your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium and continue to exist.